Welcome everyone, one and all, to Impolite Company on the GCPR.live network. Uh, and this is the show, of course, where we do what all the things that in society tells us not to do, talk about religion and politics. I'm your host, Matthew Best. Together, we walk through honest dialogue, explore messy truths, try to see the humanity and perspectives from our own. If anybody who's listening has a thought or question or something they want to challenge, even, you can email me at contactimpolitecompany@gmail.com. Love reading emails from folks. And if you got an idea for a show topic, I'd love to hear that. Don't forget, you can subscribe to past and future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Impolite Company and look for the logo, which is like right behind me there. And if you want to dig deeper into the themes we explore here, you can visit my blog at pastormatthewbest.com. And if you want to support what we're doing, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Impolite Company. So let's get into today's conversation. I am super excited to welcome our guest, Tammy Rosing, who is with me today. And she is the coordinator of Put People First PA and the National Union of the Homeless, tri-chair of the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and a minister with the Freedom Church of the Poor. Tammy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Pastor Matt. I'm grateful to be here.
Yeah. So why don't we start off with, for people who are not familiar with the organizations that I just listed, if you could give just a kind of a brief overview of what are they, what do they care about, what's the focus that you all, why do these exist? Why is this important?
Yes, thank you. Well, I would say, with the Poor People's Campaign, it's modeled and was launched back in 2018, modeled after Martin Luther King Jr.'s original Poor People's Campaign, taking lessons from that. It's essentially like what referred to as like a moral fusion movement, right? So it's about all fronts of struggle coming together, all faiths, even folks who might not practice any said religion, but it is about coming together across all lines of division. It's a national campaign that is organized mostly on the state level. So here in Pennsylvania, we are made up of different member organizations. Put People First PA and the Pennsylvania Union of the Homeless, as part of the National Union of the Homeless, are a part of it here in Pennsylvania. And one of the other national formations is the National Nonviolent Medicaid Army, of which organizations like Put People First PA, National Union of the Homeless, and many others are a part of. And it's essentially about uniting and organizing the poor and dispossessed across all lines of division.
Yeah,
Struggle. Yeah.
that's a nice quick,
To abolish
right?
poverty, right? So
Right.
that's, we want to end
Well,
poverty.
and I remember, I think it was you had told me or somebody else, I don't remember exactly who, but we're talking about the idea, and maybe this is kind of goes back historically, that if all of the poor united,
Mm-hmm.
it would be this massive movement, right? But oftentimes what's happening is people are struggling to survive, and so uh, they either don't know how to or don't know that it's available or all those type of things. And so it becomes a challenge. And then, of course, this reminds me of, I'm sure you've seen the cartoon or meme where there's three people sitting at the table, and there's a pile of cookies, and there's like a construction worker and someone else, I don't remember who, at two ends of the table, and then there's a guy in a business suit kind of representing the corporate interests, and he's got all the cookies in a pile, and one of them has a cookie on a plate and the other doesn't have one, and he points to the one who doesn't have the cookie and said, "Hey, that guy took your cookie." To kind of show like this is how this division, like these artificial divisions, end up distracting from, hey, the real problem isn't each other, it's the people who are hoarding everything in that. So that's just kind of what it reminded me of. So
Yeah,
I want to talk a little bit about the state of poverty in 2025. Almost think of it as like a State of the Union
yeah.
type of thing. So what are you seeing? Maybe we'll start kind of broad and we'll dive in deep into that. So what are you seeing as far as some of the challenges that people are facing, or if you want to go larger than that, feel free to do that.
Sure. Before I dig into that, I just want to one like thank you for bringing up that example. We study political education in our movement, and we talk and we've referred to that version of like divide and conquer, like the plantation politics, things like
Right.
that, to keep us divided. And it comes from us from all over, right? And
Yep.
so, yes, like this is actually the hardest work I've ever done in my life. As someone who's also poor and dispossessed and struggles, it is hard for us to organize one another, but absolutely needed. And get into your question about like looking at the conditions. I just remember like creating this like summarized list of spitball to try to get folks to visualize a snapshot, but we've got 140 million that are struggling, right? That's often the number that the Poor People's Campaign has talked about since our launch. But that number is rising. You know, reports coming out that poverty has risen during the Biden administration. You've got 25 million people who were cut because they ended pandemic protections during the Biden administration. Now we have this bill, this what we call the big beautiful bill for billionaires, which is going to lead to more cuts. We've got homelessness rates rising at the same time where we have 24 empty homes roughly per every single individual who is currently homeless. Um, and we've got food insecurity on the rise. Food costs are outrageous. A few of us tried to go to the local food pantry right around 10 o'clock, and they had already had to shut down because they took their maximum in for the day already, because they hand out these like
Yeah.
numbers, like lottery
Sure.
numbers, right?
Sure.
And they only opened up at 9:30. So by the time they
Wow.
got there at 10, it was like, nope, sorry, we already reached our max limit.
Wow.
Um, and we have one of the highest incarceration rates. At the same time, we're spending over $800 billion a year on the war economy. I mean, I could go on and on, but that just gives you that summarized like this is reality. Like we are struggling. Rents are high. It's hard to afford anything. I'm a healthcare worker. I
Hmm.
work in mental health care, and I live paycheck to paycheck. Even with getting Medicaid, so I get Medicaid, MAUD, Medical Assistance Workers with Disabilities. Our household does in fact get food stamps. I work as a healthcare worker, and I cannot survive.
Yeah.
It's like really really tough, you know.
Yeah.
It's
I've
like
made.
that for the majority. Oh, and the CBS the reports from I think it was CBS said that 60% of our nation's population can't afford a minimal standard of living.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the
And that
majority.
and that's not counting the percentage that if when there's when not if
Mhm.
when there's like an emergency situation, like your car breaks down, or an appliance, if you have appliances, and it just eventually they die, right? And so there's a lot of folks who cannot afford like a $300 emergency bill because they don't have savings. Everything
Mhm.
is going into survival, and then it doesn't have an opportunity. People don't have an opportunity to save if all they're doing is just using their income for survival. I and I know there's a lot of folks. I remember, and I'm not going to give names. I don't want to embarrass people, but I remember being at a meeting, and it was something for a local government, and I overheard some conversation down a little bit further down the table, and it was these folks who were obviously in better shape financially. We'll just call it that way. And this is several years ago, and they were talking about, oh yeah, in this economy, like there's no excuse that you can't get a job and that you can't do take care of paying these bills and everything. You have to try not to. And I just sat there and I was like, oh my gosh, you don't know anybody. This is part of the problem. You don't know anybody to be able to say that, and because it's not seeing the complications that go with with
Mhm.
all of it, right? And it's not just, oh, I can't pay this. It's now the ripple effect that happens on all of that. Because I really, what I wanted to say, and this would have been really confrontational, was, oh, well, then if you have a job, I have some folks who are unhoused that I'm sure would be happy to go work for your establishment. By the way, they probably haven't showered because they don't have access to one. So are you okay with that? But I didn't get an opportunity to do that. So
Mhm.
anyway, um, but it's reminding me, and I've said this before, where here we are, it's 2025, and the United States of America is the richest nation in the history of the world, and yet, you gave this brief listing of the challenges that we face with poverty, and and then there's this contrast with the richest nation in the history of the world, what, 140 million you said. That's mind blowing to just think about that. Of I don't even know where to start with that, uh, but it's mind blowing to me. Maybe we can dive into some of these individual
Mhm.
topics. So you talked about Medicaid cuts,
Mhm.
and that's from the bill that you talked about, the big ugly bill. I know from our end, we have free clinics that operate here out of the church. You've been here to the church, and our concern is that a lot of our folks that come don't have Medicaid, or don't have insurance in a lot of cases, and we don't deal with insurance. But there's a lot of people who are going to, maybe they have their own physician or anything like that, and these Medicaid cuts are going to have an impact to them, and then they're going to have nowhere to go but to places like us, or nowhere else. What do you I'm just trying to think of what can people do that, number one, it's a matter of survival, but then what can people do to help, kind of, to support each other, to try and change this
Mhm.
policy decision. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think about when we talk about Medicaid, for example, and well, I mean, these fronts of struggle are connected.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a strategic reason why we're called the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, right? Whether we're part of the Homeless Union, whether we're part of PPF, or another organization, what have you, is because healthcare unites people.
Yeah.
And so it's a way to organizing around healthcare as a human right. And so when I think about even like zooming in, right, and just looking at your clinic as an example, like I see a valuable potential partnership and where we're present and communicating with people, right, and just having conversations with them like over like a period of time, it'll happen, right, it builds up, and kind of turning it into a project of survival where folks can share their story if they're interested, um, and get into the fight, because our part of our like fight and what we're saying is expand Medicaid to all,
Yeah.
regardless of documentation status, regardless
Right.
of being able to pay or having this and that. And so organizing folks around that issue, and in the in between, we support one another and help each other through various tactics, projects of survival, and so it's a way that we can hold and build relationships, support one another like as best we can through these crises. And we've done that through our organizing work as a part of our organizing work. So I would say, one, there's various ways that people can get connected with that, with our organizing drive. Um, that could be beneficial for those in need and struggling, because I feel like whether it be groupings like your clinic, which is absolutely amazing to have, I know people that is their avenue right now if they're gonna like get health care.
Right.
I want to see how we can duplicate that in other areas. But also, I know the realisticness of like it's not funded. Like you got to fundraise, so you got to get
Right.
creative with that.
Yep.
But that also comes into imagine all the different ways that people can get connected and get organized and build a network, right?
Yeah.
That can be sustained to support one another through these efforts, through partnerships and things like that.
Yeah.
Like that's what we got to do.
I've also said that the existence of our clinics is a symptom of the problems that we have with our healthcare system. Like free clinics like this should not exist.
Mhm.
If things work the way that we often think that they should, um, these clinics would not need to exist. I mean, maybe that's the goal ultimately, but which is fine. I'm happy to put myself out of a job with it for that. Um,
Healthcare is a human right. I mean, what else?
right? Yeah, that's far more important than having these in there. But I think you're speaking to the idea of there's lots of different ways that this can happen, also, and I think that's really important. I do want to ask you about this because we were touching on this a little bit of the challenge of organizing, the challenge of getting people to engage when they're struggling to survive, when they're exhausted, when they're frustrated. Maybe they're dealing with some health challenges, whether it's mental health, physical health. They've got kids. There's a whole range of stuff that life just includes, and they may have this desire to be a part, and they may not know, well, how do I, or what do I have to offer, or I'm tired, which is a reality. What are some things that you would share with folks that would kind of say, yes, we understand, and yeah.
I mean, I would say that that's the majority of our membership. Um, and that it doesn't mean like when we do an activity, like let's say we started setting up at your clinic, whether it's there or elsewhere, right? And we were meeting folks and having conversations. Well, it starts with that, right? And then from those different base building, we call it base building, right? So we different base building activities, we follow up with people. So we might meet them initially at an activity, whether it's a door knocking, setting up somewhere, partnering with somebody. Then it's the follow up phone calls. It just starts with a conversation. And so sometimes it might go from that conversation and inviting them to things. Maybe they'll come through and join that. Maybe they don't, but you keep in contact with them through texting, whatnot, as folks are responding. But you do it on such a real personal human level because you're paying attention to what they're sharing with you about their life and you're responding to that. And sometimes through those conversations, things will come up and it'll be like, well, we can do a call in day action for you. That's not right that your insurance is denying that, or what have you. And then they get activated around that. But we have a sort of like, I mean, it's different for each of the organizations that are part of this poverty abolitionist movement. But like, it's looking at it as like a new member enlistment process. I know that one organization came up with that some of us utilize as a reference that takes people with baby steps. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Because like that's just the reality because everyone's struggling.
Right.
Maybe it's starting with that conversation that's then leading to maybe a legislative card to telling your legislator your health story, or right, or writing your story as a healthcare story as a Medicaid Monday. Um, and that's just baby steps, and then inviting them to events, and it all depends on what kind of transpires from step to step to step to step. But like thinking that we're just going to throw people into
Right.
something, it's not going to happen. You're not going
Yeah.
to be able to stick and stay. And each person's different. Like when I got
Yeah.
involved, I was gung ho, like all
Right.
about it. Never been ever since. But not everybody's like that,
Right.
and that's okay. We
Yeah.
got to meet them where they're at.
That's right. Everyone has their own gifts and talents, and that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing, which is so interesting because you're talking about 140 million people, which means there's 140 million different ways that's going to look. That's just beautiful. So let me ask you this question. So uh, maybe folks who aren't in poverty but care about this because they have loved ones, maybe they're just moral and care about topics like this and whatnot. How can folks that can be kind of allies to this? What do they have to offer, and how can they be engaged?
Sure. So the maybe they don't see themselves as someone that would want to particularly be a part of one, the organizations in this way. I mean, you don't have to necessarily be in the intermediate struggling to support or be a part of something. So there's always helping us out or coming to our events and activities. There's always donations, right? We're grassroots. We're the poor organizing the poor. We don't get any mass donors and whatnot. And we ain't got time to sit down trying to figure out how to write a grant, right? So like, so donations is one way. And I also think there's other ways to materially support. So often like we'll post and say, hey, we're doing a drive, for this. We have folks that are looking for this, supporting in that way. I also think about how in Pennsylvania here, it's really in the baby stages, so to speak. So it's
Hmm.
like new, it's forming, it's developing, but modern day Pennsylvania Underground Railroad and
Mm.
wanting to build this network. And so far, it's got a strong folks like grouping of folks that are in like South Central, but we want to build this out like statewide, and it's going to be structured in a way where we're helping to support the folks that are coming in and organizing, or it could be could be like the group of folks that we would spread the word if we want to take direct action on something that's happening. Just thinking about the various ways like encampment sweeps or whatever, tackling immigrants or the queer
Hmm.
community, like just to be clear, like they just seem to be attacking us everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and so that structure is set up to do that and build kind of like a project of survival network, right? Like that's part of why we wanted to pull you in because you have your health clinic at
Hmm.
your church, right? So let's build this network and be connected and support one another to be able to not only like want to maintain a health clinic like yours, but also how can we connect with that base that's getting those services? And perhaps we're connecting with people that need that care, right? To be able to be in a better place to organize, right? So I think about like things like that, like the Underground Railroad is probably a really good position for folks like that to get involved.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I really like that. And you keep using the term project of survival. And I want
Yeah,
to just talk about that because there's probably a lot of folks who don't know what that is. So maybe you could give a brief explanation of what's a project of survival.
gotcha. So we've often like our understand things like charity type projects. We have nonprofit food pantries, this and that. Then you have mutual aid that might also, whether they be pantries or other things that kind of work with existing network and they meet a need. A project of survival is an element that is meeting a need, but then also aiming to organize the folks into community through that said project or activity. Whether it may start out as charity or mutual aid, but it goes a little like further than that. So, for example, I'm trying to think of a recent example if I could. Like we used to set up at a food pantry and did what we call the people's clinics. So we offered help with state benefits signups and appeals, organizing conversations. If you want to share your story, that's like sort of like an example of it. I think about how when we've done through part of the winter offensive, we've done like MLK Day events where we've done clinics, and like I think we had a what we called a health and resource fair one time. So we had one folks like somebody feeding folks. We had somebody from a local agency that offers like care, so they wanted to like share that. And then we had somebody giving out like some food, or we had like gloves and scarves and hats. Um, so I think about that, right? So like, but not only are folks able to like get these things and meet their need, but it's essentially learning about the organizing work. It's having organizing conversations, and that's sort of what turns it into a project of survival.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I'm sure because there's a lot of people they hear that and they're like, "Well, what is that?" And if they're not
And it comes from studying like historical movements of the past too.
right, right.
Like, oftentimes we might learn a different history when it comes to the Black Panthers, for example, in school.
Right.
Like I mean, I don't remember that well, but what I remember, I don't remember learning until like after the fact, what the part that I'm about to say. But they essentially refer to their people's clinics, their uh, breakfast programs, things like
Yep.
that, as survival projects because they also realize the importance of including political education. Like
Yeah.
talking about why do we need these health clinics? Why
Right.
do we need this food pantry? You know what I mean? Things like that.
Which is why part of why they were considered so dangerous because they were
Mhm.
having a direct impact, and people were seeing them as like, oh, these people actually care,
Mhm.
and are trying to do something, and I want to be a part of that. Yeah.
A perfect example actually is when it comes to like when I think even specifically of homelessness and the homeless unit here in Philadelphia. It's been going on for a couple years now. They started setting up. There's a little video about it too. They started setting up with just like a dozen donuts and some coffee. They started setting up across the street from a intake center or service center or
Hmm.
something. If somebody's
Sure.
experiencing homelessness, they go there
Yeah.
and having conversations with people. And they were consistent. They picked a time and day every Friday morning. They are there bright and early for the people that stand in line and go into the center. And they're there up until a certain point, even as folks like go through and go in. And they offered various things. They had conversations, they had a survey. Through that time period of the last couple of years, they connected with people by being
Mm.
consistent. That's the other important part about projects of survival is an ongoing consistency because not only are the folks that originally set that up and that are there, but as time goes on, you're meeting new people and more people, and they're coming in, and that's how the folks in Philly built a homeless union through the Pennsylvania Union of the Homeless.
That makes so much sense. It's the idea. I remember in my previous call, we would go over to the truck stop. Maybe I told you this. We would go over to the truck stop, and we had found out that people were living in their cars in the parking lot, right? And of course, people live the parking lot of truck stops because there's showers, there's laundry, there's food, there's a warm place, when it's cold and all that, right? So we would go over just to be with people and to do laundry with folks, make sure they could get a shower, get a meal, that type of thing. And that consistency was so very important. Like they knew we were going to be there twice a month. Here's when, and all that type of stuff. And our whole goal was we're going to see people's humanity. We can't do a whole lot. We're not wealthy, but we're going to do what we can. Cleanliness is extremely important, so that people can work, so they can, just be human. And I remember some people asking like, oh, are you going to start a this or that or the other? I'm like, I don't know where this is going, but let's just let it take its natural form and
You know
kind
how
of,
much it probably meant to them, though?
oh yeah,
I know, like, when I mean, as someone who has experienced homelessness a couple times throughout my life, like, do you know how good it feels just to get a good shower
yep.
and some food and yeah, it means a lot to people.
and
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 that
to and to feel safe
yeah.
for a little bit of time of you're with people that you can be safe,
Mhm.
that you don't have to worry that they're gonna hurt you or they're gonna steal your stuff or anything like that. That was always the biggest thing that I remember is initially people are kind of like, well, what are these crazy people doing here, and then they would start to look forward to it because it's like, oh, I can be in a group of people and not have to worry about all this stuff. And it was just this almost like it just taking a deep breath for
Mhm.
folks that we couldn't solve problems, we couldn't get people into a home or anything like that, but my gosh, we could at least be provide a sense of some community and some safety for folks for at least a little bit of time. That's what we could do. It just really important. So, but before we continue, I want to take a bit of a moment of pause, and this is my pitch for the stuff that I care about, things that are close to my heart, where really it's really about faith meeting action. So first, Christ Lutheran Church in Harrisburg. in Allison Hill, and it's where I serve as the pastor. And it's certainly more than a congregation; it's a healing community with 3 free health clinics that have welcomed over 100,000 visits since 2018. We've partnered with a local community college for their nursing program. This is one of their rotation sites that they do. Partner with community organizations to do social justice healing in the area, voter registration drives, getting people light bulbs for their front porches. That's with Power to the Hill, and of course, worship being a form of commuting. So if you want to be a part of something beautiful and something healing, you can check us out at christharrisburg.org. Um, Second, Memorial Blanket Project. Every year, people make blankets from all over the country and even portions of the world. They create blankets for complete strangers that they're never going to meet. And we turn those into a massive art installation that draws attention on homelessness. We talk about it. We talk about the organizations that work with folks who are unhoused and trying to make an improvement in people's lives, get them into housing. And all of the blankets are gifted. They're given away at the end of the night. And we've done this on the U.S. Capitol lawn in front of the Liberty Bell. This year, we're heading out to Denver. You can learn more at memorialblanket.org. And finally, if you're wrestling with the heartbreaking topic of gun violence, you can check out American Roulette. It's a novel that sparks honest conversations without giving any easy answers. All the proceeds go to organizations working to prevent gun violence, and you can find that wherever good books are found. American Roulette. So now back to the show. So Tammy, I want to talk about housing in a variety of different forms. I, I covered in a show. I did a monologue on the executive order that was issued. What is this? Probably 3 months ago at this point. I don't know, 2, 3 months ago. That was essentially criminalizing homelessness. It kind of took everything that we have learned about ways to effectively get people out of homelessness and into some kind of housing, and it just rejected all of it, and it essentially made the assumption that everyone who is unhoused has a mental health problem, and that's the problem. And we're talking about things like forced institutionalization or forced drug therapy and all sorts of stuff. And I just went through and I ripped it apart because it's a terrible executive order. And I know in different states there are different efforts to do similar type of things. This is, a lot of this has really broken open with the whole grants pass decision from what was it, last year or the year before, that allowed municipalities to essentially criminalize homelessness. And I'm wondering not only your thoughts, which I can guess what your thoughts are about it, but how can we it's we can't necessarily change like an executive order, right?
Mhm.
But we can work with people and try and help them to, number one, hopefully avoid the consequences, or if people are dealing with this, what can we do to help folks through this?
Yeah, thank you. I would say like, when I was like so just upset, but also not surprised.
Yeah, right.
I just feel like what I sort of see over the last several years, honestly, it's just like the conditions get worse. The poor always seem to pay the price.
Yep.
That we live in a system that creates the problem and then criminalizes us for the problem it
Yep.
like, it's just like it's like that reminds me of that quote from that movie from a book or whatever, and I just like it always stuck with me since I was a kid. Um, and I'm just like, that is so true. And that is essentially our reality. And that our response and the way to get out of this, it's not going to happen overnight, but we got to organize, and we need to make like base building projects of survival, building up these networks, a priority, honestly, because the conditions are just going to get worse. I mean, in the reality, we've got also that counteracted into like what's going on with AI and the expansion of the data centers. Talk about taking away our resources. That's going to be a problem. That's going to cause that for a multitude of reasons. Let alone, I mean, jobs are going to be lost. Like
Yeah.
people don't understand like what is going on. You got to look at the whole picture. So we've got to educate the people. We need to organize. We need to counteract these false narratives by what do we say in our movement? Change the narrative by changing the narrator, right?
Mm,
So we've got to do a variety of tactics to bring these things to light. And so with our upcoming winter offensive, for example, that goes from November to MLK Day, right? So it's the whole like season. It's been historically led by the National Union of the Homeless. Other organizations join us. And there's got key dates. And last year on December 10th, we did what we called a people's hearing. And we're looking to duplicate that again this year. Um, and we've been studying and reflecting as a union these various attacks. It started with us this past May, what has been going on, since grants passed. We engage in what we call revolutionary lawyering. So we need to really build up that network here in Pennsylvania. Although we've had some recent things that have led us to build some experience, but that's what we got to do. We got to really build because this is going to get worse before it gets better, but the only way it's going to get better is if we organize now.
yeah.
Is ultimately what I can say. Like that is our only way to like ultimately get out of this. And by organizing and thinking things on not only just local, but being connected statewide, nationally, and so on, to be able to take on this. Because I think like in Pennsylvania, for example, not only do we have a bill that it passed the Senate,
Right.
bipartisan support,
Right.
and it now sits in a committee in the House. It doesn't sound like it's going to go anywhere. Good. And then someone in that same committee in the House introduced a bill to actually try to counteract and like to decriminalize homelessness, basically, in a sense. And so it's like we need to build a union of folks that can get in there and sort of support the efforts that are at our what do we want to say graphs to work with, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know
What
if
you
what
were,
I said made sense or not, but
oh, it does. It does. And I want to add a couple of things. One, when you were talking about at the beginning of, we have a problem and then we blame the people. Right. We have poverty, and we're going to blame those in poverty for poverty. It reminds me, like, there's a long history of this in this country, right? And this is not something I enjoy talking about, but it's the reality, right? It's like, oh, we bring in folks, different immigration groups, into like historically, there were a lot of Chinese immigrants who came to work on the Transcontinental Railroad, right? And when that was completed, what did we do? We passed the Chinese Exclusionary Act, which, like, so we brought people here. We thought that they were good workers to do this important work, and then like, okay, now just go away type of thing. Like, what? That makes no sense. But uh, so that was the first thing. It just came to mind. Oftentimes we're dealing with long historical trends and systems, and so this is one of the things that I tell people is this is nothing new. We have gone through periods like this, and not just in this country, but human history has this tendency to be in cycles and to do these type of things. And then we're like, hey, by the way, this really is not a good idea, and then change. The second thing, you're talking about the bill in Pennsylvania, and there was a couple of us that went and met with one of the co-sponsors
mm,
in the Senate, and well, with the staff, we got to meet with the chief of staff, which was fine. And it was actually a very good, productive conversation. and we were able to share stories because we were representing also, not only were we constituents, but we were also representing various aspects of working with folks who have been unhoused, whether it was going over to the truck stops or the Memorial Blanket Project, or um, it was Pat LaMarche who went with me, who
Mhm.
has literally worked in shelters and has stayed in shelters across the country and all that type of stuff. And so, we were able to have this fruitful conversation to hopefully kind of get a sense for the staff there to talk to the senator about, hey, here's the reality of homelessness. Here's the reality, and criminalizing it is not going to help. It's going to make things worse because now then people are going to have a record, and then good luck getting, like it just spins things out of control so much further. And so I also want to encourage people to go and meet with their elected officials,
Mhm.
to have those honest conversations. Like you can go in, and we went in with the notion that, okay, we're going to have a calm conversation so that they're going to listen. They're already co-sponsors, so the likelihood is we're not going to change their mind. So there's no point in yelling, but we're going to have a conversation and we're going to say, hey, have you considered that maybe it's not as easy? And part of the conversation came up because we said, you know, why sign on to something like this? And the surprising answer, honestly, a lot of times comes is because they were asked by another legislator, and they're trying to, like, they're like, well, if you sign on to my thing, I'll sign on to your thing. Like,
Yeah.
that's right. And so it's not even oftentimes for our elected officials that they are like really care deeply about whatever the whatever the bill is. They're not necessarily engaged in how this is going to impact and all that. And so it's not that they're like, oh, they're like horrible, vicious, terrible people. It's their focus and what they're focused on is going to be different. And so this is the importance of going and meeting with legislators and meeting with the staff and saying, hey, by the way, maybe there's a different approach, and why was this important? Why did you think this was important? What were you told about this? Here are some other realities in that. So that was the second thing I wanted to add, and then the third, you're again, I'm going to give you an opportunity here. You're talking about the winter offensive, so like that brings to mind so many different so many different things. What is that? Tell people about that.
Yes. So the Winter Offensive actually was a pivotal organizing drive in the original homeless union back in the late 80s, early 90s. And when the homeless union of today reestablished in 2019, they reestablished the Winter Offensive. And I can say that each year since 2019, it gets like stronger and stronger as we continue to build. I mean, they're setting the stage for us. The more worse they make conditions.
Yeah.
Um, and it's when we think about what happens between around Thanksgiving to MLK Day, that time period. It's You've got the holiday season, you've got the charitable acts. Folks do things make them feel good. It's that time period. It's celebrate Jesus' birthday. It's this, and this. Um, and you'll have folks that'll do, whether it be like a community meal or something for Thanksgiving and this and that. And um, just because of the way things have been historically, it's just like we want to counteract that charitable moment. We want
Yeah.
to show the contradiction. So it's totally okay if 50 people want to camp outside a store to get the sale price on a Black Friday, but you camp out because you have no place to go. That's a crime, though,
Right.
right?
Right.
So we like to show these contradictions during this time, and it gives those of us who um, this time of period is like hard, that have been through this struggle or even are going through it right now, think about one's mental health, like
Yeah.
how it's very depressing. It's that time period that brings that on, and it's a sense to have folks not feel so isolated, to not feel so alone, to have power. Like we have slogans that are like, Change not charity, power not pity, homeless but not helpless. How can you worship a homeless man on Sunday, then walk over one on Monday? So we have key dates that we highlight and can do various actions and activities and protest around the entire season. Um, and we have a network of folks that get involved. I know in Pennsylvania last year, it was the first year where multiple regions did an activity or event on December 21st, which nationally it's known as Homeless Persons Memorial Day. But in our
Right.
movement, because we're about coming together across fronts of struggle and things like that, it's so much more than that, right? But it's a way to honor our folks our way during that time of year, and it brings us together. It's something that we do as an ever-growing movement together. So that's a powerful date, and of course we uplift, Jesus's birthday and why we engage in the battle for the Bible. They Those in power that have all the wealth use it as a weapon against us, when really there's like thousands of scriptures in the Bible that actually show the power of the poor. And so, we do bring that into it. December 10th, supposed to be Human Rights Day, right? So we bring in that history, like a little bit about that, and because this system again creates poverty and then criminalizes us for it. Well, last year we put the system on trial and those in power, and I think we're going to duplicate that again this year and have another probably virtual that'll be shared everywhere, national based people's hearing. And then various activities could be done locally and whatnot or whatever, but it's all about building, coming together, developing our leaders, getting into step, and counteracting this narrative of that time of year. And it's the harshest conditions, the coldest time of year. It's the time that we really need to strengthen and hold each other.
Yeah. I really like that idea of holding a trial. I think it's a powerful image, and it's reminding me of when you can take these things and take them from an abstract into something more concrete. It really helps people to be able to see it for what it is, right? This is kind of like I've talked about this with the idea of this. We're getting the results that the system was designed to produce. None
Mm-hmm.
of this is surprising. None of this is like, oh my gosh, we have homeless folks. Yeah, it's kind of designed that way, right? So, which also leads to, and this will be the last part that we can talk about is the power of stories,
Mm-hmm.
because that's really what you're talking about is, like a trial is really a story that's being told, and it's competing stories, really, right? Because there's the prosecution and there's the defense, and each are trying to craft the story that they want the jury to hear, and they want the jury to see has more truth, and is the story harming people, or is it there's a this is a wrongful type of thing. The stories, I know this is for me. Last week I did a writing retreat for a couple of days, and it was the writing project I'm working on is writing the stories of people that I've encountered, just a little piece of their story, and a lot of that has to do with it's moving things like homelessness or gun violence or drug addiction or whatever the case may be. To This isn't about the issues. This is about a person. This is about somebody who's enfleshed, and it's complex and it's messy and there aren't nice easy answers, and maybe there's no answers at all. But if we don't see the humanity, we're never actually going to address
Mm-hmm.
any of the stuff, right? And so what I love about what you're talking about is it's it's moving it from a discussion about whatever the abstract issue is to this is about people's lives, and that's where I think there's a lot of hope for some change, honestly. Because if we can see the people, then we can start to shift, and we can start to say, let's consider policies that actually amplify the humanity, that actually deal with, hey, this is messy, and it's not gonna, we're not gonna, like, criminalizing homelessness is essentially trying to make it someone else's problem.
Mhm.
And that's not like, where are people supposed to go? Uh, like I remember, what was it? It was the maybe it was the Grants Pass, and it was the argument at the Supreme Court, and I think one of the justices asked a really dumb question, honestly, which is, well, why don't they just go home? Hello, this is like, this is the whole issue. Like, where are they going to go? Like, there's nowhere for folks to go. This is why they're camping out in this place, because they have nowhere else to go. It's not like they can just pack up and head home. They're not doing this for fun. So I don't know. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about the power of stories, and why that's so important, and how can people help tell the stories of the folks that they encounter to make an impact.
Yeah, that's actually good. So I will say that in our movement in general, like we do meeting communications, right? We have to have our own um, media because we can't just solely rely on any kind of mainstream media or anything like that. So we can do blogs on our websites to share stories. One thing that I do want to start, like as far as the homeless union, um, is like a boots on the ground type story share, through whether it be Put People First PA or the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, which again also includes a homeless union. Like people can go on the nonviolentmedicaidarmy.org website, and if they click on Medicaid Mondays, and there's like a blurb, and there's a thing where you can click, and it's like a form, and you can go in and fill out your story and upload a photo. And then they post so many like each Monday. So that's a way that anybody anywhere, right, has access to be able to do that. And I think, like, yeah, if folks want to get involved and be affiliated with the network and want to be able to do story share, they can definitely reach out, whether it be on our socials, email us, come to the websites, check things out. But absolutely 1000% need to share the stories. That is part of how we change the narrative. And that's going to be partially what we need to do to bring in the folks that just don't quite get it yet. Maybe they sort of think they're okay,
Yeah.
right? Right now, they're not stressing about anything. But I can guarantee you that if they're already saying 60% can't afford a minimum standard of living, that's
Right.
already the majority.
Yeah.
And then it's going to continue to get worse. And then, yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know if that was what you were kind
Yeah.
of.
Well, and it also reminds me of the fact that I think a lot of folks try to tell themselves that they're doing all right, which is a natural human thing to do. And what I discover is that the impact of stories are, when people hear of other people's struggles and what their experiences and all this type of stuff, what it does is it tells people, and they hear these stories, and they're like, oh, I'm not the only one who's
Mhm.
experiencing this. Like, here's another person's stories, and maybe there's kind of some similarity, or maybe it's just like, I hear the struggle that they're going through.
Mhm.
And I think this is a real big thing, because in our culture, I think there's a lot of folks that are experiencing a sense of loneliness, in the sense that they're the only ones that are going through something. And even when we say, like, oh, 140 million people, that's almost that we can't even, like, put our minds around that, because that's such a huge, that's half the population, right?
Mhm.
Roughly half the population is considered in poverty, essentially. And that's almost mind-boggling for people, because you can't be like, I can't picture what 140 million people look like. But when I hear a story, or when people hear a story about a person and they have a name, and then they hear the things that they're going through, and it's like, oh, I can identify with what's happening there. Oh, and I'm not the only one who's experiencing this. And I think that's where it's really important, because then there's a sense of hope, like, oh, okay, I'm not alone, right? That's God's. I think this has been my experience. Is talking with people, and they have this sense that they think they're alone, and the reality is they're not alone. They're actually part of, as you said, like there's this huge majority that are all experiencing some variation of these things,
Mhm.
and yet they think they're alone, when that's just not the case. And this kind of talks about what you're talking about, the importance of organizing, the importance of being together, so that people know that, yeah, I know you're struggling to survive, and you're not alone, and you don't have to do this alone either, right? I mean, that's the other part, is
Mhm.
it's not just, you're not just alone, but you don't have to do this alone, because we can't. We
Right.
literally cannot. No one can do this alone, and that's part of what the system is designed to do, is make people feel alone.
Mhm.
So anyway, so with the last couple of minutes, Tammy, I want to give you anything that you want to say. You're going to get some last words here. So what do you want
Okay.
to share with folks?
Um, I just want to share that I'm someone that just never thought I'd be doing this work. I mean, I didn't get involved in any kind of organizing work like this till 2017. And I've learned so much. I have developed so many skills. I have had the privilege of being able to publish some writings, which has always been my dream, but always denied to me to this system. Um, and I just want to say that I want to be able to bring that joy to folks, and I know that, like, I'm not struggling alone anymore. Like, I have go-to folks I reach out to if I need some emotional support, or maybe it's like we're, going through a struggle, or like we just figure things out. We have a way to, like, that we hope we're building, like, intentional real relationships with people. And these are the people that I'm the closest to. I'm in the trenches with these folks, and it is absolutely possible to figure out the balance, and being a part some role. And I would just encourage folks to not think that you can't, but just be like, I at least want to have that one-on-one conversation and find out if I can. And to please, like, follow us on our social medias, put People First PA, National Union of the Homeless, or Pennsylvania Union of the Homeless, and it's of the homeless. Whether it be Instagram, Facebook, various, Nonviolent Medicaid Army, um, that's part of our network. And the Kairos Center, the Freedom Church of the Poor, will also be doing some, things, on their Sunday evenings for the Winter Offensive. And if you follow us on, like, social media, or sign up to get involved, you can go to our websites. Same names as the names of the organization.org, to get involved. It's that time. Our very survival as a human race depends on us figuring this out and coming together and organizing. Like, our very actual, like, survival depends on this, like every
Yeah,
one of us. And we
yeah,
need to come together. And I believe that this is one way for those that, have faith, right? This is like a calling for me. And I can say that I feel like this is our way of really, truly bringing heaven on earth if we really abolish poverty.
there you go. With that, that's the last word. Tammy, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on to the show, talk about these really important issues that I know we oftentimes in society we talk about, oh, these are important issues, but this literally have impact on so many people's lives. So Tammy, thank you so much, and just I just thank you for the work that you do, the organizing that you do, and the impact that you have on people.
Thank you.
And with that, we will see you all later.